Hello everybody in the chess world. Today I'm going to show you the modern defense Tartakower variation. Sometimes they call this the rat. Basically I'm talking about d4, d6, c4 and d5. So I'd say the half of the players know this, like they think this is really known. A lot of players find this as some sort of surprise. So my history with this opening, I started playing it with black. I mean, nowadays I play it with both colors. And this is a detail that I really like, so I can talk to you about, both sides. But initially I used to play this with black when I started playing chess. So I was like a 1500 or a 1600. And usually white players went into this variation, which is, I haven't lost a single game even back then when I was even much worse player than I am nowadays. But this is so solid. So okay, to make the general idea really easy is yes, white broke our right to castle one day, but black always has a safe house after c6 and king on c7. For anyone who knows this opening, this is really known. So it was more like practical results what drove me to keep playing this. Whenever I went into this line, I never lost a game, even against players with 2000 or more. It's so solid, it's black and I used to win a lot of games as well, because there are some dangers around that. So pretty quickly, although I knew that objectively this position is equal, black has total compensation for the fact that they have lost castling right, because they have this c6 and king on c7. I prefer black here. I've done it my whole life. I still prefer black here. Now, the main move in here is not to play d takes e5. That is one of the reasons. The main move is knight on f3. So my main studies back then, it was war on this line, what to play against the main line knight on f3. Now, before going there, I'll really briefly show you this about the d takes e5, queen takes, king takes. So for example, we'll see stuff like knight on f3, f6. This is really normal. We solidify the pawn on e5. Yeah, we'll follow it up with c6. Let us say knight c3, bishop on e6, e3 to protect the pawn, c6, bishop d2, knight on d7. Just I'm gonna briefly scratch the surface. There are other videos on these lines. I'll just show you a few ideas, for example, knight c3 in here after the exchange, of queens. The main line went like this, and g3. This is like leaving this e2 pawn there, instead of playing either e3 or e4, which is the most natural thing that, some beginners do, to just develop the bishop and leave this one protected against a possible bishop on e6. Okay. G3 is the main line, and they go for a double fianchetto with white. In here, for example, a5 is the customary move, like the solid one. You can even play g5, going aggressive. It's fine. A last detail that I used to like more in those days than nowadays, but if instead of playing with g3 or e3, the white players were to choose e4, well, of course, we could continue with the normal c6, normal move. We can even play g6, just with the idea of then continuing with bishop on h6 and exchanging those bishops immediately. I used to do this in a lot of games. I used to like this. For example, bishop d3, bishop on h6. And I had a lot of good results because, yes, since then we're going to play f6. Well, that means that we've exchanged our bad bishop, and we've left white with definitely the bad bishop, So strategically, you're already really happy. There were ways to even search for the advantage. And this knight in here, if not on g4, I think more often than not, I went to f7 and searched for this square. After some moves, let us say stuff like this. I don't know, knight e7, and then one day knight on f7. I don't know. Well, all of this is more or less known. So now I want to go to something that I haven't found in other YouTube videos, which is, well, what to do against the main line knight on f3. And again, the answer is e4, and here you have knight of d2 or knight on g5. These are the main moves. I gotta say, still, I love this position for black. And remember, I said I played this this position, this exact position with both colors. So for now, I mean, everything I'm showing are lines that I love for black and that I still do love for black. So I ended up having a problem after that on what to do with white in this position. I'll talk about this after showing the knight f3 e4 lines, but have that in mind, because that is a thing. Sometimes it's when you love an opening with one of the colors and then you play the same order with the other color, you might get in trouble. But okay, we'll come back to that. So after the knight on f3, e4, knight g5 is the main move. In case of knight fd2, which is another main line, you know, both lines are answered by a5. So we gain the space, we protect the e-pawn, and we're always going to follow it up with a g6 and bishop on g7. If the knight is in here or if the knight is in here. That is kind of like the general idea for us with black. So, for example, in here, e3, knight f6, these are all theoretical lines. And knight c3, c6, this is a typical thing. Again, one that we also do when the white's knight, instead of being on d2, is on g5. So, there are a lot of ideas behind this c6 moves. C6 move. One is mobility for the queen, but mainly, you know, another idea is playing knight a6 and knight on c7. Now that the c7 square has been vacated, that way when they will play a d5, yeah, just to support that. And another one is, well, now if at any point white plays d5, we have the option, not necessarily we're going to do this automatically, but we have the option to answer with c5, and there is no take en passant because we came from c6, not from from c7. So that's another reason to play c6, to quickly explain why c6 right now instead of, I don't know, g6 and bishop g7, bishop on e7. Really, you know, main line is c6. So it's really normal for white to react with f3, just hitting there immediately. Some players play d5 in here. I prefer taking this and going for the g6. And again, you see some sort of Dutch Leningrad scheme for us. We see that this pawn is, well, it's a little tender. It cannot be protected by another pawn, by a white's pawn. So if we can control that and control the square right in front of it, well, we like this, right? We have the whole space. We have some potential weakness, well, actually a weakness in here. For example, castles, bishop d2, rook e8, queen c2, queen e7, against piling up and always controlling the square. And if someday they're ready to play e4, we occupy that square. This is, for example, one of the ways of playing this line. And again, it's I really like black in here. What can I say? I love black in here. Definitely, no doubts for me. I understand that it's a preference. Maybe objectively, then it's not like there is such an advantage, but I really like this. Now, as an exemplary game, this was like my model game in this line, with Knaak versus Speelman. So Speelman is going to win really quickly against Knaak because of some mistakes. Knaak played knight on g5, which is the main move. Again, we're gonna go with f5, the same ideas as in the last line I showed. Knight c3, c6, still on the same track, only that with this knight in here instead of on d2. And knight on h3, this is one of the main lines for white. And in this game, we saw knight on a6, again a typical move. Another reason to have having played c6, as I showed you, knight on a6. So one of the plans for black is to go knight on c7 and then d5. e3, knight on f6, normal development for now. And now already Knaak made a dubious move, because Knaak here played d5. And you'll see that it's not hard to understand why this is a strategical mistake. The thing is, this move is dubious because it's going to allow knight on c5. Or one day, let us say, a knight on e5, you can see that. It's weakening these two squares. So let us say maybe knight on c5 and to e5, maybe like this, maybe like this. Okay, that is an obvious thing. What might not be so obvious is that, well, a lot of times white does play this d5, but they wait for black to first play knight on c7 to then play d5. This way, when the knight is on c7, then we play d5, and now if this knight wants to try to take advantage of this square, well, It's a knight that is going to have to waste another tempo to go back. It's quite logical. For example, it's better to play bishop e2, bishop e7, castles. Let us say bishop d2, knight c7, and now d5. Now that we won't see a knight taking immediate advantage of that square. Let us say, I don't know, bishop d7, rook c1, rook c8. This is more normal. In the game, Knaak rushed this d5, and so it's just strategically a little bit wrong. It's not like Spielman play knight c5 immediately or anything like that. He just went with the normal scheme, g6 and fianchetto in the bishop, b3, bishop g7. This is typical for white to also put the bishop on b2 and oppose that fianchetto bishop. Castles, and after queen d2, knight g4 immediately. It's funny because we can see still some lack of development for black. I mean, at least this bishop, but this aggressive move, knight on g4, is already good. The game continued, bishop on e2, knight on c5, rook d1, and queen h4. Again, really aggressive. So, okay, in here was like the decisive mistake by Knaak. He played knight on a4. This is an immediately losing move. I mean, black is already much better. Castles, I think, just was the right move. And after bishop on e5, the way to be able to defend the king for white was taking this, coming up here, and after g5, well, you have to play g3, otherwise, yeah, you take out the knight and you receive mate. But at least after g3, queen on h6, knight fe2. And yes, black is much better. There's even this infiltration on d3, bishop on a1, and I think bishop on f5. Black is much better. But in the game, after Knaak's knight on a4, big mistake. Well, f4 won the game immediately because, well, you can see that this knight cannot capture here because it will blunder on f2, the mate. And the funny thing is, okay, all the dark squares are falling now for white, but mainly you cannot protect e3. There's no way to protect that point now. After f4, this is 100% winning for Spielman. So, for example, I mean, if you play e takes f4, just e3, again, remember there is this pin right here, so you got nothing. Or if you play the bishop on d4, well, they'll take it. Once again, if you take it with the pawn, they'll throw e3. And if you take it with the queen, they'll just play knight takes on e3. I mean, again, no defense for the point e3. So in the game, Knaak took on g7. Of course, Spielman played the intermediate f takes e3 move, hidden on the queen. And the game followed queen c3. Rook takes f2, just threatening some discovers with mate. There's no defense. If you play rook a1 to give this square for the king, you're losing after rook takes g2 check, and after king d1, rook takes e2 even. It's a nice sequence. You go, boom. Just, you know, king takes e2, queen takes h3, you're losing everywhere. So before resigning in the game, Knaak played bishop on h8. At least he's threatening, you know, queen g7 mate. And, well, Spielman wrapped things up very simply with rook takes g2 check. And after king on f1, just knight on e5. And, well, he's going to follow it up with checkmate. And, of course, blocking, you know, just the communication in here and preventing this mate. I don't know. So, okay, this was an 18-move miniature by Spielman. Knaak played it pretty poorly, but as you can see, you know, just let us go back to our roots. So I was in here, and I was like a proud position for black. No problems after d takes e5. Really aggressive positions and searching for great advantages after knight f3 and e4. So everything was going fine. Until one day I realized that I didn't know what to do with white in this position, and it was like this after, I mean, I was a d4 followed by c4 player. I still am, not in every game. Sometimes I like playing knight f3, stuff like that, but I love this. I'm a d4 player, and the most natural move to continue after d4 against almost anything or anything is just d4. So one day I had this teacher. He was an IM. I'm not gonna mention, as usual, no names, as he might not want to be mentioned. But one day I was like, hey, I showed him everything that I just showed you, how much I love this Tartakower system with e5, and then I was like, hey, what do I do with white? Because I had no clue what to do. D takes e5 to me is awful. I understood that knight on f3 was probably the most professional move, the most theoretical, but what can I say? I really like this for black. And as I remember, as I was telling him, I was like, what else? If I play d5, let us say, f5, I already like black much better. I mean, what is this? What do I have to play e3? I mean, this is so passive, seems ridiculous. And what else? Because if I don't do anything, black is just going to take this pawn. And when I recapture, they're going to go knight on c6, developing a piece and winning a tempo. So let us say that I play g3. I hated those Catalans and stuff, but I remember even telling him that. Like, let us say that I decide to play like this. Well, but, I mean, isn't black already equal? Just taking the pawn in the center and knight on c6. So I remember he started thinking for a little while, just like going to this. And I said, yeah, I know what you can play. You can play knight c3. And I started looking at this and I was like, all right, I didn't know this move, but I won't black play like this anyway. I mean, we're on the same problem as before. Any move that doesn't react is going to allow black to develop a piece with a tempo. And he said, yes, but there is a specific plan in here and a move that I don't think you know. And he was right. He showed me queen d2. Which initially it looks ridiculous because of course we're blocking our bishop, from developing. But as he explained, it was like, well, don't worry. Obviously the plan is to go then with b3 and bishop on b2. And remember that initially I was like, okay, pretty interesting, and I didn't know that. But the fact remains the same. I've lost a tempo in the opening. I'm sure the computers are going to give immediate equality for black, and I'm not sure. He was like, and I remember he was telling me like, yeah, everything you want, but I can tell you a lot of strong players have been playing this, quite often even double with some sort of double fianchetto with white, and it's really interesting. So I started playing this with white, and this is what I play with white nowadays. In this position I play knight on c3. So I want to briefly show you now from white's point of view some of the theoretical lines in here, because knight on f6 is the main move. As I said before, we put in action our plan. Immediately playing b3, we're going to play bishop on b2. So this way, yeah, our queen lost a tempo, but at least she remains in a cool square, active one, where it won't bother our bishop that is going to b2. So still there are some details to know, because for example, and here a lot of black players go bishop on e6. It's not a bad move. Besides developing the bishop, if white's a little distracted and they play, I don't know, some normal natural move like knight on f3, well, I think d5 is already at least equal for black. So normally here we will have to go e4 just as to oppose to that possible d5. And for example, bishop e7, bishop d3, castles knight g2, and I've seen some knight on d7 and knight on d5, positions like this. Now, if you like this with white, I tell you, you have to be careful about a5. This is a move that you have to be very careful with. I don't remember who invented this. I remember Karpov playing this. I mean, the plan is as simple and as caveman as that. Black is going for this, just throwing the a pawn. And it's funny because initially we'll go like, well, we play bishop on b2, not only the natural developing move and the move that we wanted to play, but now, after a4, well, I'm not too worried. I mean, okay, a takes b3 is not even a threat. I will recapture, and thanks to this bishop, if rook takes rook, I'll recapture. Yeah, but the problem is that a3 is a threat. And you know how this goes positionally. We cannot play a3 to prevent that. They'll play a pawn takes. Even if we were somehow able to recover this pawn, it's just you gain the influence of this rook over our rook on a1. So black is always gaining something. So you gotta be careful with this a5. So after bishop on b2 and a4, this is the main line. Now I'll tell you, I think you should all play rook d1. This is my move in this position. Of course, there are, again, strategically we're fine. If they take on b3, we're a capture, and now if they play on a3, well, now it's different. We go back with the bishop. There's a safe square for the bishop. We're already playing well with the rook. Now, why not play knight takes on a4? Because, of course, I'm not going to say rook takes a4 or some ridiculous stuff like that. That is nothing in this position. Come on, yeah, there is nothing. But did you see d5? Because this is the reason why this a4, knight takes on a4 is kind of bad, or at least too risky for white. After d5, black is effectively threatening bishop on b4, taking advantage of this position of the queen on d2 and the king behind. And the thing is, let us imagine, I mean, there won't be any defense against that, because, for example, I don't know, I'll play a nothing move just to prove my point. Play h3, they play like here. Well, obviously knight c3, d4, and if bishop c3, this. I mean, bishop b4 is a real threat. We can fool around there. So, okay, it's not like we're lost. But for example, if you play a3, the most natural move, they just take on c4. As after the exchange of queens, they take with the king. And once again, look, we have the same problem. We cannot take here because we lose the knight. They're hitting on b3. If we play long castles check, just bishop on d7, we're almost losing here. You really have to be careful with this a5, a4 line. In this position, I think long castles was the main move. They take on c4 anyway. This is the other idea of d5. You saw this. You know, d5 has the double threat of a really annoying taking here where we cannot recapture because we lose the knight and the threat of bishop on b4. So after long castles, they take in here. We exchange. Now, well, you can see still we cannot recapture. If knight c3 is the move, if we played e3 to threaten this and try to force black to do this and leave us a little, let us breathe a little bit, they wouldn't take on b3. They will play knight on e4, and now we're here. It really, again, seems so stupid, but this a5, a4, it's really annoying. So, okay, now you're supposed to play knight c3. Finally, they exchange. And this line goes like bishop c5, e3, and castles, and black is slightly better already. I mean, so for all of these reasons and all of this complication, I mean, again, now I'm looking at this from white's point of view. It looks like I'm making an argument still for black. But, okay, in this position, we do have rook d1, and now it's peace. Now it's fine, okay? You know, we're not worried about some d5 with bishop on b4. We're not worried about a3 because we will have, just the bishop on a1. Okay, we're fine here. Okay, still, of course, they take that because, well, once again, black did something, managed to, well, open up the a file, and they can use that rook. So still, it's a proactive action by black. But okay, this position is different. This is there's more equilibrium here. You can play even lines with g3. I like this e4, bishop g7, bishop on d3. Again, this bishop on d3 is not everyone's favorite move, because after that, you do allow knight on d4, which is hitting here. I still play this because I don't care, I don't mind giving up the pair of bishops. But this line is one of the theoretical ones. You exchange that, and now we play with the knights. And I've seen stuff like, for example, knight on h5, because they want to throw this. And we just castle, and when they play f5, we go c5. And yes, we're taking advantage of this influence on the file. So yes, I still like a lot of these lines with white, and there are a lot of lines in which I play the sort of double fianchetto with white. For example, as I said, if, well, there are more moves than a5 and bishop on e6 for black in here. So for example, sometimes we see stuff like this, and lines like this I play g3, castles, bishop on g2. This is also a line I play some tournament games with this. Now, One last detail that I want you I want you all to consider, and in this specific line that I show you, for example, I think that was in this position. I had a game in this position. I played bishop on g2, rook e8. We went for some complicated position that I don't remember. And when I came back home, it was hard for me to find how to improve the opening game for white. And at some point, the computer showed me that in this position, I could have played knight on h3. And of course, bishop g2 is a good move. But this was a curious detail for me, because, I mean, if there's one moment where I was not looking on how to improve white's game, it wasn't here. Bishop g2 is just an automatic move. It's too natural to play, and of course it is a good move. But I really like that the computer opened up my mind to a detail. Might seem really stupid, but to me it was really clear. The computer was rushing to play knight on h3 and then knight on f4, and then playing bishop on g2 and castles. So yes, one of the reasons was to overprotect the e-pawn. But the other thing that I realized is, hey, of course this knight is going to f4. And this is the detail that I wanted for you all to pay attention to, because otherwise you might play stuff like that, like this. I mean, it's not wrong, not totally wrong, but think about it like this. Even in here, you should play it like this. It's so clear that the square for this knight is f4. This is a safe square for the knight. Because remember what happened in the opening. I mean, you remember what happened in the opening. In this position, black played like this. So there's no longer an e5 pawn. And that detail is really important, you know. It's the other thing. If there's no longer a pawn there. So let us go back to this line. There's no longer an e-pawn. So nobody is going to attack this f4 square. And I mean, the only other pawn that could one day try to, you know, kick out our knight from there will be the g-pawn. But hey, this is one of the, this belongs as a shield for black's king. It cannot be so happy, you know, just to march down the board. So when you think about those two details, you know, going back, let us say to this position, I think it's very, very, very clear that even though you could play with the knight on f3, please remember that, because it's really important. Much better to just put the knight in there. You have, you know, solidifying here a knight that cannot be kicked out. A partner for the other knight to have total domination of the d5 square. So this is the last strategical point. I remember that thanks to this detail that the computer showed me, I was like, yes, the knight goes into h3 in this line. So okay, I hope you like this this video and this line, because really, to me, it's one of my favorites. I mean, one of the few that I really play with both colors. So as usual, I'll leave my cat Citronetta to ask you to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks a lot for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.